lethargy and whatever, because the food system makes it impossible for us to actually make the food choices that we want to make. I think it's really important for us to reflect also on kind of why this is coming about, and at the time sort of where we're facing recession. It's economic growth, the irony of economic growth is actually pushing us into this situation in the first place. I mean, in Bristol we're seeing our land being sold off to development, instead of being saved for food production in the name of economic growth. I mean, we've got 10,000 new houses planned in Bristol. I mean, rather than looking at the empty buildings and thinking that we could save that land for food production, they're wanting to build more houses because it means more economic growth. So, it's really important for us to look at where kind of the agendas are going with this and think about, actually, we really have to prioritise our food. I mean, we have to prioritise land for food production. We have to prioritise energy for food production. So, Transition Brixton invited me here today just to talk a bit about what we're doing in Bristol. And so I'm going to sort of spend the time this evening really talking about the initiatives that we're developing in Bristol to kind of transform our food system there. And in Bristol, we've kind of been blessed with an abundance of community food initiatives. We've got a long history, and we've got a very strong permaculture network. And they've been doing some amazing work, really sort of in individual communities, creating a real sort of oasis of inspiration and food growing and innovation. But what's becoming increasingly kind of obvious is that actually cities don't really operate as tiny little hubs. And actually, as wonderful as all these little individual projects are, unless we actually address the whole system, the city as a whole, then we're not going to really change it. And our aim is that we want people to be able to walk into shops and restaurants and wherever they're getting their food from and not have to think about it. We shouldn't have to go out of our way to really make that effort. It should just be there. And I'm sure most people in the room feel the same frustration I do, that you walk into a shop and you just can't make that choice that you want to make, whether it's on a health basis or an environmental basis. So that's really our vision for Bristol, and is to transform food to the extent that we can just go anywhere and not have to think about it because it's there. The right decisions are made for us. So what does that mean? Well, for a start, that means that we need to be thinking about where is the food that we're eating in Bristol coming from in the first place. I mean, we forget that, don't we? We kind of walk into the shops and it's so complicated. That's the point, is that, again, globalisation has complicated things so much, and it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, it didn't used to be like that, and it didn't come across, it didn't develop naturally. This has come about because money has been invested in certain businesses and certain ways of doing things that has supported the globalisation of our food system. And actually, it could be really simple, and it could be really beautiful and really good for us and good for our planet. So in Bristol, what we're doing is we're actually about to start looking at where does all our food come from. We're going to map that. We're actually going to look at kind of how food is distributed in Bristol. Who are the main distributors? Where are they getting that food from? So we'll be talking to retailers, talking to caterers. And we're looking at both supply and demand, because if we're going to be talking about transforming our city's food, we can't just think about the production of food, but you can't just think about, persuading people that they need to demand more sustainable food. It's got to be a combination of the two. So we're looking at both of those. But we're also looking at a variety of sectors. We're looking at the private sector, we're looking at public sector, we're looking at the voluntary sector. An immense amount of food is actually bought through the public sector. I mean, you think about schools, you think about hospitals, there's a lot of food that passes through that means. And councils, local authorities, have these contracts that they're trapped into. And, it's our responsibility in the community to put pressure on our local authorities to transform those contracts. And again, we're told that these contracts are 10 years long. Okay, they're 10 years long, but let's just have a vision that we're going to change them over that time. Let's not let that put us off. So there's a real need for us to look at the whole system, supply, demand, public, private sector, all of these things. And I think also what we need to do is see ourselves, just like Transition Brixton is, as little hubs within a city that all need to work collaboratively. Because we can't work as a whole city. I mean, in Bristol, there's no way that we could coordinate all the work, just by operating on a city level. But also, the relationships that exist and that are meaningful for food happen at that community level. There's no way that, in my role sort of coordinating food across Bristol, that I personally could go in and persuade all the retailers in Bristol that they need to transform their food, because I don't shop at all of them. They've got no interest in what I think. But if the shops are, in your community, then you can build those relationships. You can go in and talk to your local retailers and tell them what you want. So what we're doing in Bristol is we're looking at developing a programme whereby communities actually start building these relationships with their retailers and start talking to them. They're people, you know, and they want to know what you want because you make their profits with them. So we're looking at how we can do that, but we're also looking at the opportunities that are arising now out of the recession. Because Bristol City Council's Recession Action Plan is looking at how it can use the local empty shops that are on the high street. And so I've managed to persuade the regeneration team to pilot having a look at a cooperatively run food shop. So what we're seeing happening a lot in Bristol and probably in London is that food co-ops are developing because people are wanting to buy organic food that's sustainably sourced, but can't afford to do it from shops. So they're going and buying, you know, setting up a food cooperative in their living room. And that's taking people off the high street. You know, it's great they're buying the right things, but at the same time, we want food to be socially inclusive and happening in a social environment. So these empty shops give us the opportunity to go in and start setting up social enterprises and community-owned shops that we can demonstrate to the independent retail sector that we can do this, that there is an alternative to the supermarkets. We can provide healthy food or, you know, sustainable food coming from local producers at affordable prices. It is possible. We're also looking at community-supported agriculture. I don't know if people are aware of that, whereby we're linking landowners, farmers, with communities so that they can basically have an exchange and actually, just like an organic delivery box scheme, but not on a commercial level, but on basically sharing the risks that are involved and actually paying up front so that farmers have the confidence to, you know, to produce food on their land for local markets. Because at the moment, so much land is actually lying fallow because farmers just don't have the confidence to kind of invest in it because they don't know if local communities are going to buy it. So if a community can get together and say to a farmer, we promise we're going to buy your food for the next few years, then he can go ahead and grow organically and serve that local market. So there's such a potential with these shops that are coming up through the recession for us to take these over in our community spaces. So I urge you here in Brixton, if you know of any of those spaces, then do it. Speak to, you've got council representatives here, speak to them now and see if they might be able to help you out. So another big issue we're looking at, as well as this building relationships around with retailers, is looking at the land issue. Now, there's already been some work kind of looking at, could Britain actually feed itself? I mean, do we have enough land to feed ourselves? We talk a lot about the fact that we need to relocalise, and actually there's not going to be enough energy in the face of fossil fuel depletion, peak oil, to actually continue this kind of export-led growth model that we've got. So, but do we actually have enough land, you know, to do it? This is a big question. So there's been a lot of research done into that, and increasingly we see that we can kind of get close to it if we rely a lot on our neighbours in Wales and Scotland. But the message that's really coming through loud and clear is that we need to use all the land in urban areas as well. It's not going to be enough to rely just on the land in the countryside. So at Transition Network, we're starting a project that's actually massive and looking at basically a food plan for Britain whereby we're going to map